Hey everyone, it's Paul here, and it's been quite a long time since I've done a video on this channel. I've actually just got off the back of doing quite a long tutorial series on the Machine Mark III, and you can get that over at groove3.com. Definitely recommend you check that out if you're just starting up with the unit. It's a good kind of beginner's guide. But for today, I'm going to be taking a look at the Layers Waves Edition rack extension from Propellerhead, which I actually had a chance to do some presets for. And I'm going to be showing this to you in the context of making a Vaporwave track. Now Vaporwave, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of closely related to synthwave, in that it shares a lot of that kind of retro 80s and 90s sort of flavor and aesthetic. But typically what it involves is taking an existing song, you sample a loop of it, add a whole bunch of compression, maybe a few extra bits and pieces, and then you just down pitch it, which isn't going to make for a very interesting video. So for this, I'm going to create an original piece of short music and then make it sound as though it was sampled from a cassette or a record or something like that, and then kind of give it the Vaporwave treatment. So it's kind of a two-part process. So to begin with, I'm going to lay down some chords using a poly patch from Layers Waves. And this is a really cool instrument. You can see it's got these kind of 4 layers here. Each one you can really think of like an individual synth. So it has its own amp envelope, filter envelope, LFO settings, and all the rest of it. And it comes loaded with a whole bunch of waveforms from the Waldorf Wave synthesizer. So I'll go ahead and record this chord progression, and then I'll kind of make a few adjustments to the sound as I go. Okay, so I'm just going to tidy up the note length here, just drag this out a little bit. Now I want to have a little bit of movement going on in this patch, so I'm going to go to the third layer, which is this pulsar layer, and then I'm just going to assign some LFO1 to the frequency cutoff. And also I think I'll turn tempo sync off, so we just have this kind of free running LFO happening on top of the progression. Okay, so that'll do for the chords for now. I'm going to collapse this, and then next I'll go to bass and I'll choose the complex bass patch and then just put in a bass line. I really like this bass patch. It's got a nice kind of digital 90s sort of vibe going on. So next up I want a sort of bell sound, so I'm going to go to the bells category and then we'll choose the chirp and chime patch. And again, I'm being very sort of just quick and basic with these sounds. I can always go back in and sort of make changes to them later on. Now, next I want a kind of constant sort of rhythmic sounding synth. And for that, I'm going to go into the poly category. And then I'll choose this really cool patch called the Stepford chords. Now this is a really cool thing in the Layers Wave Edition, is this trigger sequencer. Now you could kind of use this like an arpeggiator, so that as the track runs, it's going to select gate events for each of these 4 layers. Or in this case, every time I press a key, it's kind of voice assigning to each layer with each key press. And you can actually see that here with these note on indicators. But because we've got a nice mix of sort of root and fifths, it's giving the chords a bit more of a complex feeling. Now I want to kind of punctuate those rhythmical accents a little bit more, so I'll go back to the bells category. We'll choose breathy bells. I think what would sound really cool on this is kind of like a single eighth note delay. So I'll go to my delays category. You see that I've also organized all of my devices into categories here using the new favorites list. Took a little while to do, but it's definitely worth taking the time. So we'll use the echo. And then I'll just set this delay time to 1/8 with 0% feedback, and then more or less a 50-50 mix. Perhaps bring that mix down a little bit actually. Now one thing I'll do before I move on to the drums is I'm just going to EQ those pads a little bit so that they don't interfere too much with the bass. And to do that I'll just use the channel strip EQ. And just apply a little bit of a high pass filter there. A couple of other things I'll do, I will just add a little bit more feedback to the delay on this breathy bells patch, and I'm also going to turn the built-in delay off as it's kind of conflicting with the timing of that delay. Okay, I think that sounded kind of cool so far. It's got a nice almost kind of like corporate feel to it, which is a really integral part of the Vaporwave sound. So next I'm just going to quickly move on to my drums, and for this I'm going to use the Jackbox 707, which obviously is modeled after the TR 707. The next I'm going to drag in the 727, which is the percussion module. And then just kind of sprinkle a few bits about. Now for this kind of shaker echo effect, I'm going to hold Control and Alternate while in the key editor, and that's just going to allow me to draw a straight line down on those velocities. Okay, that sounded kind of cool. I'm going to bring in an 808 next, and again just sort of sprinkle a little bit more percussion across this beat. And I'll just use these switches to change the toms to percussion. Now obviously for those main drums, if I wanted to, I could take a feed from each of these individual audio outputs and process them separately. But in the interest of saving time, I'm just going to drag something directly into the insert slot for the whole drum machine. So I'm going to go to distortion, and then I'll just use the tape emulation on the Scream 4 just to kind of add a bit of punch to those drums. Now also for that 808 percussion, I want a sort of gated reverb effect. So we'll go down to reverbs, and then I'll drag in the RV7000 and just enable the gate mode. And then lastly, I'm going to sort of echo that shaker effect on a clap on the 808 track. And again, I'll hold Control Alternate to just draw in those velocities there. I also want a kind of clap roll leading into these 4 hits. So I'm going to change the grid resolution to 30 seconds. And then just do the same again and draw in a sort of upwards ramp effect. That might actually be twice as long as I need it to be. So I'll delete these first 4 notes and then just draw in that ramp again. Okay, so I like the sound of that so far. I'm not really going to go too much further with this, as the idea with a kind of Vaporwave style track is that you really just have one section, possibly 2 sections that just kind of loop or alternate. So I don't need to go into a full arrangement here. One final thing that I will do is I just want to introduce a bit of sidechaining from the kick on the 707 to all of my melodic elements. So first of all, I'm going to select all my drum parts. This is just something that I like to do for my own workflow. I'm going to color these so they stand out from the melodic elements, and then just move them up to the top of the rack. And then with all of these racks selected, I'll just press on sort selected device groups. And then you'll see here in the mixer that the order of the tracks is going to mirror the order that I've set in the rack. Now from here, I'm going to shift and select all of my melodic elements and press Ctrl and G to place them on a group. And I'll call that group SC for sidechain. And then I'm going to drag in this really cool device called Pump RE, which is a sort of sidechain effect, but it's also able to be triggered by gate messages. So I can go to the back of the 707, and then I'm going to drag from bass drum 1 out to gate input. Okay, it's actually bass drum 2 that I use there, so let's try that again. Now I'm just going to really quickly arrange this into a sort of intro section and then a main loop. So I'll just start by removing the kick and snare pattern. And I think also that bass synth as well can go. And I think I want that to be double length, so I'll just move this main loop across and duplicate. And then we'll just have a really simple kind of double snare hit leading into the main loop. Okay, so before I move on to giving this the Vaporwave treatment, there's a really nice patch in the poly category that's just too nice not to use, and I'm just going to place it over this main loop section, possibly replace the Stepford chord section, but I'll see how it works together. Okay, so with all of that done, I'm going to head over to the mixer section. I'm also just going to make sure that this new track that I made is also going to the sidechain bus. And then I'm going to Control select the drum channels and the sidechain bus, and then hold Control and G to send it to a new bus. And we'll call this tape effect. And what I want to do is kind of degrade this and make the sound a bit more lo-fi. So it sounds like it's been recorded off perhaps a record onto a cassette, and just add a bit of grit and noise to it. So I'll head back to the rack view. And I'm going to use a couple of devices here. The first is the Audiomatic Retro Transformer. And this has a great vinyl model that introduces some hiss and record crackle. You also hear that it's dulled the sound just a little bit. So once again, I'm going to use the Scream 4 in tape mode. And then just bring the damage control down a bit and increase the tape speed, which is going to add a bit more high end back into the signal. Okay, so I think that sounds pretty cool. The next step is I'm going to go to File, Bounce Mixer Channels, and I'm going to choose the Master section, choose the loop as the range to bounce, and then set new tracks in song. And then I'm just going to move this audio track out of the way of the MIDI. I will keep the MIDI there just in case I want to go back and change anything later on. And now the final step here is really simple. I'm just going to drop the tempo. Let's try something around 95, and then also drop the pitch as well by 4 semitones. And straight away we've got that distinctive lo-fi down-pitched vaporwave sound, and it does sound as if it's been sampled from, you know, an old recording from the 80s or 90s. And you could go one step further with this and perhaps take something like Xverse OTT, which is a free plugin that I do tend to use a lot, and I'm going to place it on the insert section of this new wave channel that we've made. And that's just given that an extra layer of kind of compression and degradation that just makes it sound a little bit more authentic. Of course, from here, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you can do. One technique that works quite well is to chop and repeat sections of the wave file. And because we've got this rendered down, you're going to get that nice kind of glitchy resampled feel when I duplicate a portion of the recording. And of course, if I wanted to take this further, what would make it sound really authentic is to introduce perhaps a bit of filtering and some phaser. So for instance, I'm going to go to the filters category and I'll use the PMS20 analog filter. I'll hold alternate while I click on cutoff, and that will just create an automation lane. And then I'm going to bring the low pass cutoff frequency from 0 up to full. And I'm also going to introduce a little bit of phasing for this last bar where the snare repeats. So again, I'm going to set this to bypass and then alternate and click to create automation. And we'll just turn it on for this final bar. Now, of course, you could take this a lot further, but I think this is a pretty good place to stop. And it's just an interesting approach to a genre that's usually defined by taking pre-existing content, but it shows that it's possible to create original loops, but make them sound resampled and lo-fi and degraded, and then give it that authentic vaporwave sound. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thanks very much for watching.